Good afternoon. Today I have Jim with me. Hiya, Jim. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, goodness. Hello, Donna. Yeah, really nice to meet you. Where to start? I'm a family man at my heart. Met my wife 50 years ago at college. We've been married 45. We've got 4 grown-up children, and at last count, I think we have 4 grandchildren. So that's the very heart of what I am, who I am. I'm a businessman who's now got rather more time on my hands. So I'm trying to follow what I am following my passion for writing.
Awesome. Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
I've always been fascinated with words and always been keen on reading. So yeah, I always had a hankering after it, but you know what it's like, a busy life, in business, as you climb that greasy pole, you're time poor. Now I'm richer in terms of time availability.
What gave you the push to finally sit down and say, okay, that's it, I'm going to start writing now?
Well, I think it's really that sort of lifelong ambition I had, the opportunity to spend time as I wanted. I've spent a few years being in a non-executive role and chairing 1 or 2 companies, and that's brilliant because it still kindled my business passion that gave me more time. So I choose to spend that time with the family, occasional travelling, writing and walking. And writing and walking are my 2 passions, really.
And what made you choose the genre that you write in?
Well, I guess we're all influenced by a little bit about what we know, and a little bit about where our interests are. And my interests are, I know a little bit about business. Would never claim to know oodles, but people often say, business, well, that sounds terribly boring. It's just about making money, isn't it? And I always say, well, it's nice if you do make money, but making money is that's just the currency, it's counted. Business is all about people, and I've worked with inspirational people, committed, dedicated. I've come across through a few villains in my time, a few people with some interesting approaches to life. And, you build up a rich reservoir of characteristics you can mine in creating your own characters of fiction. So, to my mind, the business and business background is actually quite useful. And also writing, I'm sure anybody who's takes to writing a little bit will come across sort of periods, writer's block, or suddenly a situation that isn't going entirely according to plan, and you think, oh, where do I go to from here? How would that character really respond? And I just take myself off into the hills. And the more I think, the quicker I walk. The more I walk, the more I think about this. And I usually come back with the help of fresh air and all that time, with slightly better perspective and with a few ideas I can sort of seed, really. So that's my comment. That's the way I combine my 2 hobbies, really.
Sounds great. What's the most interesting thing you've found doing research for your book so far? Or what's the biggest rabbit hole you've fallen down?
I think in preparing for Urban Scarecrows, I was really, there's quite a political context, and some of that is, semi-dangerous, depending upon your viewpoint. Everybody has a different viewpoint. But I'd had this niggling away at me for a long time, and I just wanted, there was a germ of an idea and it wouldn't let go of me. So I wanted to burnish that, but I didn't want to make it an overtly political book that people would just ignore if you weren't primarily interested in politics. So it's essentially about the journey of an individual and his family in what become pretty horrendous circumstances. So it's all about people and emotions, you know, hate and love and lust, and about how about human frailties and how people react to that. And, you know, so I hope it's a good read, whether you're interested in the political subplots or not, and whether you agree with them or not. But we will see. It's, you know, the test of the pudding's in the eating, isn't it?
Indeed. Okay, so if you were able to take out one of your characters for a meal, who would you choose and what would you ask them?
I think I'd choose the main protagonist's wife, Rosa. She's she's Spanish, and we lived for we had a small house in a northern part of Spain for a while, and we got to know quite a few Spaniards. And I love their exuberance, their vitality, their passion. They're loud, or tend to be loud, noisy. And actually, the wife of somebody who was my finance director a good few years ago, she was Spanish, and she was just so animated and passionate, and, you know, you'd have a wonderful evening with her. You know, she would pepper her narrative with Spanish expletives, and, you know, impossibly endearing is probably a reasonable overview. So I like Rosa. I hope anybody who reads the book will learn to do so as well.
Since you first sat down and started writing, what have you found more difficult than you expected, and what have you found easier than you expected?
I started out doing it in a very Jim-like way. I mean, back in, I don't know, about 2013, 2014, I wrote a novel. My daughter said to me, my daughter's in marketing, Dad, you're great with words, but you really need to go and, you know, you need to learn some of the craft. And of course, you know, I knew she was talking wisely and I ignored her. I just got this idea and I wanted to talk about it. And it was prescient in a way, because essentially it set the backdrop for Brexit, so it was well before its time, before anybody had mooted the thought of a referendum. And again, it's about the characters and their journeys. But I did realise after I'd done that I needed some help, I needed some guidance, and I wanted to learn a few things. So I met through a writing club a local author, and she became my coach for a while. And she was marvellous, incredibly talented. What a taskmaster, you know. My kids loved it because it felt like they get in their own back, because, you know, they used to give me the homework. Will you have a look at this, Dad? Well, I will, if you want me to comment constructively. Yeah, that's what we want you to do. So I get the red pen out, and then of course they'd hate me briefly for that, you know. Well, having a writing coach who does exactly that and gives me a hard time over certain things, and then inspires me, they really enjoyed. I did as well, by the way. She was great.
Yeah, it sounds great. But yeah, your kids must have been absolutely laughing. It was like revenge, finally.
Revenge is sweet, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there anything you found harder than you expected?
You know what? The hardest thing for me, there's an awful lot that's quite hard. It took me a while to get my head around properly points of view, perspective, and to learn some of the techniques there. But the hardest thing of all, and the thing I've least enjoyed, is the bit I've been doing the last month or so, which is engaging in social media, and it feels like self-promotion. And whilst I've been in business and I'm no shrinking violet, and I'm quite open and quite opinionated, the idea of self-promotion just doesn't sit very comfortably. So I found that really, really hard, and I've not enjoyed that really, if I'm honest.
You're not the only one, don't worry. Most authors I speak to don't like it. They're all introverts by nature anyway. So the fact that they've got to sell themselves, they hate. So you're not the only one.
I said to somebody I'm working with on the marketing PR side, I said, look, I'm so tired of this. I'm just itching to get back to doing some writing. You can relate to that, I suspect.
Yeah. That's why I'm here. I do it for you, or try to, or do as best I can anyway. So I don't mind shouting about all of you. So if it saves you doing it, then
doing a wonderful job. And clearly, the whole world of social media you're embedded in, and I get that, and that must be quite fulfilling. But it's quite a stretch to get there from a relatively standing start.
yeah, it's taken work to build up and stuff, but yeah. I've started to notice more now, only in the last month or two, that I have an impact. So yeah, it's taken a while for me even to get there. So yeah, I understand.
Well, you've done incredibly well. I mean, you've got a lot of followers, haven't you?
Yeah, fair few, all over. Yeah, and keep trying to get more.
Yeah, excellent. Well, keep a good work up is all I can say.
I will. I like I said before, I love it. So I'm not stopping. It's fine. Are you self-published or are you with a publisher?
I'm doing it through Silverwood. So, and I've tried to do it. Who've been in the main very good. I've tried to do it. I don't want to learn the art of publishing and everything that goes around that. So I wanted somebody to do that for me, to do the heavy lifting. And I massively underestimated just how much work I would have to do in support of that. But life is a learning process, and I do like being challenged. I do like the learning process, and writing's always a challenge.
How did that come about, your deal with them?
I had an experience I didn't enjoy at all, which was through Austin Macaulay. I maybe shouldn't say their name, but they're well known all over the place. And it was just so formulaic, and I felt that I learned more about how not to do things than I did about how to do things. I mean, it was a contract that was part funded by them and me, but I was seriously underwhelmed. So I did a bit of research as to who were those with good reputations, and Silverwood kept coming up, and I spoke to them and was impressed. So here we are.
Oh,
And publication date today.
Yeah, congratulations.
It should be more than just a glass of water, shouldn't it? And it will be tonight.
Yeah, you've got time yet.
Indeed. Yeah.
What's been one of the most fun scenes or chapters that you've written, and what's been one of the most difficult?
I think some of the things that taking the latter first, I think the most difficult I find, there are chapters in Urban Scarecrows, I think they probably exist in any book, that have real impact, or I hope have real impact. But there's quite a lot of the story that needs to develop. So stuff can't be happening in every single chapter throughout. So if you like, I call it the glue. It's really important because of character development and plot development. But I find those more difficult. I really enjoyed. I had a few. A friend said to me recently, I had a few holes of golf. He said, Liz, his wife, wants to take you to task over some of your views, and this chapter 1, loved it. Where are you going with it? It said to me, gosh, are we into concentration camps? We're not going into gas chambers, are we? He said, and I just want to know, how did we get to this point, and what happens to the characters? And I just want to read more. And that to me was everything I could possibly want to hear from somebody who's read the first chapter. So I enjoyed that. And let's hope he finds 1 or 2 other chapters like that, sort of equally compelling.
Yeah, if you've done that in the first chapter, though, that's definitely a massive win, because that's where you need to do it. So that's awesome.
Well, I sent you the book through, Donna, so
You have.
You'll be a judge yourself. Be kind is all I would say.
I'm always kind, don't worry.
I don't.
It's on my teaming TBR. My TBR mountain, it can't even be called a pile. I dread to think how many books. But I will get around to it soon.
Yeah, it's staggering, your appetite for and the number of different genres you must cover.
Yeah, I'll read anything. I'm quite happy to read anything. So, which I think is quite unusual. I know people usually stick to genres, but I bring it on. Anything, fantasy, romance, autobiographies, non-fiction. I'll read it all.
One of the genres that I really enjoy, well, there are a couple actually, historical fiction I really enjoy, but espionage in particular. So, authors like, John le Carré is a master, but there are the modern incarnations like Mick Herron. If I don't know whether you've read any of his, absolutely brilliant. Dark humor, black humor very much. And irreverent, non-PC, some of the things that appeal to me. It is brilliant. But and there are lots of other authors in that genre I enjoy. So there are bits of Urban Scarecrows where tradecraft features. So I sort of mine some of that from some of my reading material. But I'm guessing that all writers, all authors do that sort of thing.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Some do, and some, particularly crime writers, I find, will stop reading any crime fiction while they're writing because they're so scared of accidentally taking something from someone else's book and including it, that they will absolutely stop reading any crime fiction while they're writing and read something else or read nothing. So, yeah, everyone's got their own quirks, I guess.
Personally, I think, it's, reading those sorts of authors is inspiring. If I tried to, replicate what le Carré or Mick Herron does and what they say, how they present it, the narrative voice, I would fail dismally. It has to be Jim Chambers. It has to be authentic. And we aim to develop that style. But it has to be done just through iteration, really.
When you're editing your book, what's your most overused word or phrase?
Overused word or phrase. Gosh, I'm not sure the answer to that. One doesn't immediately spring to mind, but I will give you one fault that my coach used to tell me off about, or still does when I speak to her occasionally. I hope I've improved a lot. And she would say, trust your reader more. Trust your reader more. You're spoon feeding them, Jim. And that comes from a business background where you try and communicate very explicitly, because if you don't, even when you do, people will read into messages from you that which you don't intend. So, it's sort of drilled into me, and I've tried to address that. And that's another reason why I was pleased with the reaction I got from a few people to my first chapter. So I hope the book doesn't do too much of that.
When you first decided to write, what was the one thing that you wanted to happen or wanted to achieve, and has it happened yet?
I really enjoy the writing process, and I wanted to get to the end. And I've, again, from my business background, I'm quite committed and quite dedicated. If I'm quite action focused, or results oriented. So I have got to a conclusion. I have got to publication, and that feels very satisfying. But yeah, so I think that's probably the best answer I can give you on that one, really.
Have you made lots of author friends since you started writing?
I've made lots of contacts of people who write, who author. Done some of that through a writing club, although my membership of that has lapsed since COVID. So they've been meeting virtually as necessary, and I've sort of moved away from that a bit for various reasons. But I met a few authors through that, and obviously worked with lots of writer members. And actually, having said how frustrated I get with social media, my attempts at Facebook has allowed me to meet quite a few Silverwood authors and other authors. And I've enjoyed that, and I've enjoyed looking at some of the things they've done and how they've marketed and published their books. So that's been all part of the learning experience, really.
And are you planning on going to any of the literature festivals this year?
I ought to, didn't I? And I have done in the past. I don't have any immediate plans, but I am talking to the people I'm working with on marketing. They are targeting one or two of those. So I've got a live conversation with them tomorrow on exactly that topic. So who knows, I might be heading off to Stratford or Bath or wherever. There are so many these days, aren't there?
Harrogate. Harrogate's the one. That's the big one.
Which would you recommend? Harrogate. Okay, well, my eldest daughter lives in North Leeds and used to live in Harrogate, actually. So yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, that is by far. I mean, they're all amazing. I seem to be going to most of them this year, but Harrogate is the huge one, and they've got their own awards and stuff now. They've become quite big, so yeah, that is, and it's 4 days long or something, but you don't have to go the whole 4 days. But yeah, it's amazing. I went last year for the first time, and I loved every second.
So great networking opportunity for you, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And also a chance to meet people that I've interviewed. I've seen all these people online, but to actually this year, if everyone that's promised to buy me a drink buys me a drink, I'm just going to be drunk the whole weekend because I've been promised quite a few drinks.
Sounds like a good weekend in the offing.
Yeah. I'm a lightweight as well. I don't really drink, so I'd only take one or two and I'd be gone anyway. So yeah, I'll just have Coke, I think.
Sure, I and all of your viewers absolutely believe you, Donna.
Oh yeah. Anyway, have you had a lot of feedback from readers apart from those for your first chapter? Have you had many reviews today?
I've had a few. In the Hope Affair was my previous book, and to be honest, I didn't put anything like the effort I needed to into marketing and PR. So I've had lots of informal reviews from people who. I think the most warming review I had was from an ex-colleague of mine who the business let go, so he didn't need to be nice to me. And he had an awful accident. He's a mountain biker, And cutting a very long story short, I mean, he was seriously ill and completely out of commission. It was a bad head injury. And when he bounced back, he picked the Hope, he said hello and picked the Hope Affair up and actually said, you know, Jim, this was a real page turner. And this is the first book since my illness I've actually been able to read to the end. And I thought, well, you didn't need to say anything. And that's probably worth more than from people who are family or friends, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very generous of him to say that. So I had one or two things like that, which have been very rewarding.
Yeah, that's lovely. If you're able to spend a day with any author, dead or alive, who would you like to spend a day with?
I think it would have to be, I don't know. I was immediately going to say Le Carre. He is my favourite author. Le Carre, a bit old school, I suppose, you know, classic. But goodness, his experience, that would be interesting. Mick Herron, who I've mentioned as well, would be irreverent and I imagine a hoot. And Robert Harris, I think, is a fantastic storyteller. You know, if you read his books, the prose is so simple and so compelling. And at first you think, well, that's easy. It sure as hell isn't. It's really tough to do that. So he's somebody else that, you know, and I think Robert Harris actually would interest me because he breaks, if the writing community has some sort of reputation, it sort of tends to be a bit sort of creative lovey. Do you know what I mean by that? I'm being rude, aren't I? Now, I'm not gratuitously rude, but I don't naturally fit into that category. And I don't think Robert Harris does. You know, his politics are not left wing, they're centre right. So I admire him for that, and he's respected despite that, I suspect. So there you go. And if it was a politician, Winston Churchill, please.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him as well. It'd be amazing.
Well, it'd be amazing for the claret or whiskey as well as his tales, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Although the person I'd most like to speak to is the Queen, because she's seen it all. She's seen them all, experienced and spoken to all the politicians. So I'd love to sit and have a chat with her. I think that would be amazing.
Oh, absolutely. But I suspect that she's just so brilliant that, you know, it would be a less honest conversation or a less open conversation than you get from Winston Churchill. You know, you might, yeah.
Perhaps I'd give her a couple of drinks first, get her to open up.
That sounds like a call, but be careful she doesn't set the corgis on you.
Well, apparently she's got a wicked sense of humour as well, so I reckon she could take me down quite easily.
Yeah, just an amazing lady, you know, and this troubled world of ours, to have a constant there who stands for dignity and respect for everybody, irrespective of colour or ethnicity or sexual orientation, whatever it might be, you know, I think is just wonderful.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So I have to confess to being a traditionalist. I think this country's in enough turmoil, and the Western, you know, the whole world, frankly, a little bit of stability, even if it shouldn't work, but actually does. Well, don't throw it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you're able to travel to any period of time, either forwards or backwards, where would you go?
Yeah, I mean, if you go backwards, it would really depend upon your station in life, wouldn't it? You know, because that used to, well, it matters still today, but to a much less extent than used to be the case. I'd love to be pitched into the cabinet of Winston Churchill during wartime, Second World War. I think that's what because I think I would learn more and be challenged more and have to work harder than ever. And I'm somebody who thrives on challenge.
Where's the funniest or strangest place you've ever woken up?
Funniest or strangest place? Oh, all right. I'll dive a long way back into. I wasn't very. I was in my parents' bad book for this, but I was, I think, 16, and friends of mine who were a couple of years older, we went off for a weekend of rock climbing at Wirksworth, Black Rocks. But of course, it wasn't just rock climbing, so we got a tent, pitched a tent, and we went down in the village, and of course had our fish and chips and a belly full of beer. And I don't think I've drunk a pint of Guinness from that day to this. And they insisted on putting me on the tent flap side of the tent, so that when I needed to express myself, shall I put it like that, I could just lean my head out. So that was pretty odd. That was pretty odd. And actually, I once worked as part of work experience. I was in catering at the time, a long time ago as a student. I worked at this hotel and I hated every moment of it. And the one guy that I really liked was somebody who was put upon by loads of the chefs and the managers. He was kitchen porter and he was a good guy. He was a really good to honest working guy. And he and I had a few drinks too many, and I couldn't get back into my room, so I spent the night in my car. So I'll be giving the wrong impression, won't I? I'm reasonably abstemious, but nobody will believe that now.
It's always the guys that seem to have got really drunk and ended up. I mean, one guy was on a boat, and to this day has no idea how he ended up on it. But obviously, he was drunk when he arrived on it. But yeah, it's great fun. I love it. And usually when you guys get really, really drunk, you get naked as well, which is also really odd. It's something that women don't tend to do.
I have no recollection of that, Donna.
Yeah, that's what you're saying now, but I'm sure your mind's wearing it, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, I hope there's not been too much of that, not a pretty sight. So.
No, thankfully there was no evidence in those days anyway, was there? So your secrets are relatively safe.
I know, it must be terrible. Don't you feel for, I'm a father of 2 girls and 2 boys, now in their 30s and having their own kids and so on. Very proud of them. And I said to somebody the other day, it's scary enough bringing up, especially daughters. Maybe you shouldn't say that, but it's true. If you're a father, you worry more about your daughters than you do your sons, although my experience is the sons getting more trouble. But the daughters, but today, boys or girls, actually, I mean, bringing them up in this social media world and reading of some of the practices and the pressures and, how, the low life in this country prey on young people. I mean, it's how, I can't imagine what additional pressure that brings on parenting.
Yeah, I'm grateful that I was an older teenager when mobile phones came around, and then I think I was in my mid-20s when social media started. So I missed all that. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be a teenager now. It must be horrendous. There's no escape at all. They can get to you 24/7 pretty much. So yeah.
And the pressure, the pressure in life generally is just so intense these days, but it seems to be for younger and younger people. So you need to let kids be kids. You need to let teenagers go through those teenage years. And I always, my wife and I always used to say, our teenagers at their best were our best friends. Used to treat you like mates. They would take the mickey out of you, they would entertain you, you could have banter with them, they keep you young. That's in the job description of teenagers. at their worst, move on. Just don't think about it. They're horrible. They're horrendous. It's yeah. Every parent goes through it, and there isn't an answer. Well, if there is, we never found it.
No, yeah.
You just have to bear with it and be there for them when they come out of whatever it is they're going through.
If I was to ask your lovely wife and those nearest and dearest to you, what would they say your most annoying habits are?
My most annoying habits. I think they would be stumped for any answer at all.
I'm sure they would.
I don't know. Lacking in patience, easily frustrated, easily bored, demanding. Sometimes hide my love behind quite a demanding. I was quite demanding as a parent. I think probably still am. I think generally as a friend as well. I always say we all have a few friends, lots of colleagues, lots and lots of contacts, but just a few friends, and they're the people who see the authentic you. And I would hope that if somebody said, "What's the one thing the one quality you'd like to think you have," and that's being authentic. It's maybe a bit cliche. My dad, one of the hardest working men I've ever known, working class, butcher, had nothing, literally nothing. He inherited literally nothing. And he forged a business and brought three of us up in the back streets of Derby. Hardest working, loved his beer, honest as the day was long, didn't have the education that I was lucky to have and my kids have. And he just used to say to me, "You know what, son, you've got to look yourself in that mirror every morning. Make sure you can like who you see." And, it's old and cliched, and I can't honestly say that every single day I've been able to like that image, but you try and live to that sort of, a key value. Okay. See, I am a bit of a politician or a businessman, aren't I? I've turned your question about negatives into a positive.
Yep, that's fine. But I've got more out of you than you're expecting to tell me, so my plan has worked as well.
Yeah, you're a past master. You see, I'm just a novice. I'm putting in your hands.
Good. Are you working on anything at the moment, and what's coming next for you?
I did a course on a short story course, actually. Curtis and Brown, I think it is, very well regarded. I really enjoyed it. I learned an awful lot. So I want to do a bit more on short stories. And as part of the course, we did, there was an exercise they took us through. So you produced a short story, and then we had a critique, individual critiques at the end. And there's quite a lot to work on there, but there's a germ of an idea, more than a germ, there is a base story there. And I was once told that some of my characters are a bit nice, and I tend to write in the third person. So I've broken out of that, and the main protagonist is the antithesis of nice, and it's written in the first person. So I did that because it challenged me, and it was a learning experience, and I enjoyed it. So I'm itching to pick that up again and see where I could take it. I'd like to do a few more short stories.
Awesome. Well, I don't have any more questions for you. You may be relieved to know, unless you think there's anything I haven't asked you that you want to tell us.
Oh gosh, no. I mean, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Goodness knows what any of your viewers will make of it, but I hope I reach one or two, and I hope one or two has a peek at my book.
If you've got a copy to hand, do you want to plug it while you're here? Show it off.
Here we go. Urban Scarecrows. Have a look on my website, jimchambers.author. Chapter 1 is available there free, and actually another chapter 10, which both have slightly different feelings. So have a look, see what you make of that. And, you know, this for me is hopefully the effort of all social media and marketing and so on and so forth. It's about reaching more people this time. And that's not about making money. It's about, you know, if you put quite a few hours, quite a bit of effort into producing a story. I like the story. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I do. I hope a few people do as well. And I hope it gets to a few.
Yeah. So if people do want to buy it or they want to find out more about you, apart from your website, where can they find you? Where can they find your book?
The book will be available on most online resellers. The ebook, Silverwood Books is one obvious. It's on Amazon and Waterstones as well. And I will be launching the ebook, which is priced fairly low, so it's priced at just £2.99, which I've deliberately done so that it's, you know, within most people's reach if they wish to. But over the next few weeks, that'll be up on various ebook platforms. Which would you recommend, by the way, Donna?
What,
Kindle, obviously.
Kindle, yeah. Is it Kobo as well? I think it's quite popular.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. So we should put it up there, and yeah, if anybody's still listening, thanks for persevering.
And thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
That's been lovely. Have a good evening, Donna. Take care.